Talk about a talent, this politician has a special knack for getting on the nerves of 1.4 billion people in India. It's like he's been conducting a How to Irritate a Nation seminar for years. Back in Canada, Trudeau's popularity is on a downward rollercoaster ride. Being stuck in New Delhi must feel like a mere mosquito nibble compared to the giant problems he's facing back home. We're talking food prices shooting up, homes getting pricier than unicorn manors, a sprinkle of corruption, a dash of questionable foreign policy, and a generous serving of woke-ism. It seems the Canadians have had their fill of him. But let's not dwell on his Canadian capers. Instead, let's dive into instances where he's managed to give himself and his country a cringe-worthy pat on the back. Especially when it comes to his Indian misadventures. His journey of embarrassment kicked off in 2018, and the cringe fest began the moment he set foot in India. You see, Prime Minister Modi has a knack for going all out to welcome leaders from around the world at the airport, whether they're from big or small countries. But in Trudeau's case, he was greeted by a junior agriculture minister and not a single cabinet member in sight.
Prime Minister Modi didn't even meet Trudeau at the airport. Instead, he was met by the junior Minister of Agriculture. In Canada, our Parliamentary Secretary of Agriculture is Jean-Claude Poisson. I don't even know who that is. But if they sent Jean-Claude Poisson to pick me up at the airport, I'd feel snubbed.
Some media reports even speculated that Trudeau's support for Khalistani extremists might have been the reason for the chilly reception. And then, the comedy of cultural integration began. His wife donned an embroidered sari, and his children were all decked out in Indian attire. But Trudeau went for the full-blown Indian wedding ensemble. I can't help but wonder what his actual intentions were there. And let's not forget the unforgettable Bhangra dance performance. It was so mesmerizing. Well, let's just say, it could give even the wildest drunk uncles at an Indian wedding a run for their money. And if you thought the embarrassment ended right there, well, think again. While some world leaders worry about terrorists and assassins abroad when they visit other countries, Trudeau takes a different approach. He brings his own assassins along for the ride. Talk about a unique solution to the terror problem. Enter Jasper Atwell, a Khalistani terrorist who got an exclusive invite to not one, but two official events with Justin Trudeau in Mumbai and Delhi. Atwell showed up in Mumbai, and in a colossal embarrassment for Canada, ended up in photos with the Prime Minister's wife Sophie Trudeau and Canadian Minister Amarjeet Sohi. When a reporter had the guts to ask Trudeau about it, he chose the strategic, ignore and hope it goes away tactic.
Mr. Trudeau, I want to ask one question. Why did you invite a Khalistani terrorist for your reception?
Keep in mind that Atwell had been convicted of attempting to murder Punjab Minister Malkiat Singh Sidhu in Vancouver in 1986. Sidhu survived the shooting, only to meet a different fate later in India. A judge even called it an act of terrorism and sentenced Atwell and his gang to a cozy 20-year prison stay. Citizens of Canada, just like Atwell, can get an India e-visa, a perk India offers to folks from around 150 countries. And since Atwell's name was removed from India's list of blacklisted Sikh militants back in 2016 by India's Home Ministry, there was absolutely nothing to stop him from getting that e-visa. This is how he felt after the trip.
And so thank you very much, everyone. That's it in terms of this year. Nothing else happened. Nothing at all. We didn't go to India.
Fast forward to 2023, in G20 Summit, under India's presidency, we can clearly see in the video how PM Modi welcomed other world leaders with that warm smile of his. And now take a look at this, when Trudeau's turn comes. It wasn't the red carpet treatment he was expecting. He was even scolded by PM Modi for the growing Khalistani extremism in Canada. A Canadian political commentator on X said that Trudeau's role at the G20 Summit was marginal at best. Modi clearly chastised Trudeau for his interference. Trudeau embarrassed Canada and denigrated Canada's global respect and influence. Justin Trudeau's soft take on Khalistani separatists in Canada and to woo Sikh Canadian voters are evident. The extremists operate freely in Canada, just like 2611's mastermind in Pakistan, and conduct major anti-India incidents. They've vandalized Hindu temples, taken swings at Indian flags, and even tried to turn the Indian consulate into a bonfire. India had to put up grills and railings just to keep them at bay. The Khalistanis even putting up their Kill India posters. And when Trudeau was asked about the whole fiasco, he came back with, well, let's just say it was one for the record books.
Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us.
According to Trudeau, it seems like vandalizing Hindu temples, throwing a celebratory parade for a former Prime Minister's departure, and engaging in some good old violent activities falls under the category of free speech. He's like the superhero defender of free speech, no matter how wild. Now, let's take a peek at how another Western leader responds to their own Khalistani extremist spectacle.
No form of extremism or violence like that is acceptable in the UK, and that's why we are working very closely with the Indian government to particularly tackle PKE, pro-Khalistan extremism. I don't think it's right. Our security minister recently was just in India talking to his counterparts. We have working groups together to share intelligence and information.
India and the UK seem to be close to concluding negotiations on the free trade agreement, with expectations that it could be completed before the end of the year. But what about the FTA with Canada? Well, it's stalled because Trudeau is putting domestic political interest ahead of national economic interest.
The Liberal Party of Canada believe it to be in their domestic political interest to have a negative relationship with Prime Minister Modi and his government. And because of that, they have chosen to again put that domestic political interest ahead of the national interest in this negotiation. And we are very concerned, and frankly, I'm pretty angry about it, given the fact that I think we had been making some real progress. As a province, we had offered and in fact used our offices, including our international office in India, to advance that discussion with the Indians with regard to agricultural access, with regard to non-tariff trade barriers, where we felt that there was really opportunity to make progress. And I think the Indians were fully prepared to engage in that discussion. In fact, I know they were. And to have that derailed in the lead up to what has turned into a debacle for Prime Minister Trudeau in India is deeply frustrating. This happened in 2018 as well. We ended up with a situation where Saskatchewan trade with India went from over $1 billion a year to $500 million a year. And who paid the price for this? It wasn't Justin Trudeau, it was Saskatchewan farmers, it was Saskatchewan miners who were able to sell much less of our product and our commodity into that Indian market.
How do you know with any certainty that the issue at this point is from the Canadian side, right? I mean, we've seen the issues around foreign interference in elections. There are deep concerns about what India is doing there. India has expressed displeasure with Sikh protesters in this country who may support an independent Sikh homeland and want the government of Canada to crack down on that. And we've seen, globally, they're buying more Russian oil, they're buying a lot of Russian weapons. I mean, how do we know Canada is the problem in this two-way relationship, and maybe rather than the Modi government itself?
By way of example, I had the opportunity to sit down with the Indian energy minister about a year ago. He literally told me that he would buy every single molecule of Canadian energy that we could get to coast and to market in India. The reality is that we can't get that commodity to Tidewater, and that's a whole other discussion around pipelines. But sure. The fact is that the Indians want to buy more commodities and goods from Canada. Despite the political challenge, the Indians chose to pursue this early progress trade agreement with Ottawa. To have this all derailed again because of the Liberal Party's political interest is deeply frustrating. And it is Saskatchewan producers who are actually paying the price of all of this.
The Modi government wants Canada to sort of crack down on some of the protests they've seen from Sikh Canadians outside their embassies and stuff. I mean, how do we know they're not trying to leverage Canada to deal with these issues, which are a real thorn in Prime Minister Modi's side?
Well, I would say this. I mean, I've seen a couple of the posters that have been going around that literally call for violence against Indian diplomats. I could only imagine the response, the rightful response of the government of Canada had we seen that same thing occurring in capitals around the world, calling for violence against Canadian diplomats. I think that the desire the Indians have for that particular issue to be addressed is not an unrealistic proposition. So, I mean, there are real concerns there, but really where I'm coming from as the province of Saskatchewan is that because of a number of these bilateral issues where I do hold the government of Canada and Justin Trudeau accountable for, we are going to have our producers paying the price because of it.
Even the Canadian trade mission to India, which was supposed to come in the month of October, was postponed by Canada. Honestly, India isn't too fussed about your trade mission. So, here's a polite plea to the Canadian government: please do not send your delegation to India in the future. Trudeau's dance with vote bank politics is like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. You're bound to drop a few along the way. He ignored the Air India Flight 182 tragedy, a devastating event that claimed the lives of all 329 individuals on board, a majority of whom were Canadians. This incident remains the deadliest terrorist attack by the Khalistanis in Canadian history. It serves as a somber reminder of the consequences of neglecting security concerns for political gain. The analogy of rearing snakes in one's backyard holds true. Eventually, it may lead to unforeseen and regrettable outcomes, a lesson demonstrated by the situation with Pakistan.